for people that are trying to say that the DSA is the future of the Democratic Party, yeah, I don't think you're close. I think you need to go back to the last contested Democratic presidential contest, and you see that everybody mocked and ridiculed Joe Biden through Iowa, through New Hampshire. And then he got to South Carolina and he rolled up huge numbers.
We saw what happened.
And he won. Right.
Let's break it down. So Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley has secured the Democratic nomination for governor of Wisconsin over Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong. Crowley was ahead of Hong by roughly 3,200 votes when the race was called. And because Hong now has conceded, there will be no recount. Crowley's campaign manager wrote to supporters on social media, thanking the other candidates. It reads in part this: from day one, this campaign has been about what comes next for Wisconsin, making life more affordable, strengthening our schools, creating good-paying jobs, and making sure opportunity reaches every corner of our state. The tight margin was a surprise given Hong's wide lead in polling that prompted other candidates to drop out of the race early on, including Crowley, who recently re-entered the primary with the backing of outgoing Governor Tony Evers. Crowley will now face Trump-backed Republican Congressman Tom Tiffany, who is a member of the House Freedom Caucus and voted against certifying the 2020 election.
All right.
Here we go. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we have the co-host of our 8 a.m. hour, staff writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire, co-host of the Rest is Politics podcast, the BBC's Katty Kay, former U.S. Senator, Emma's now political analyst Claire McCaskill is with us, and conservative commentator and author of the book How the Right Lost Its Mind, Charlie Sykes is with us as well.
And Willie, just looking at this panel, when you talk about Wisconsin, it's obvious we want to go to Katty Kay.
Yes.
Katty Kay, tell us, as you get up to Oshkosh,
I mean,
we'll go to Willie
Why
for the first question. Why not?
Well, we did have a little bit of a Mount Rushmore up there, with all due respect to Katty. I'm going to go to Charlie Sykes to kick things off here, Joe.
Yeah.
Let's just say how wild, Charlie, first this race was. Yeah. The man who is now the nominee, David Crowley, was not in this race. He dropped out in early July, kind of giving the field to the frontrunner, Democratic frontrunner, Sarah Rodriguez. She drops out of the race. He gets back in the race. He was supposed to actually be on vacation this week during the election, but was compelled to get back into the race. The polling, which now I think we can kind of throw to the side, over the last several weeks and months had Hong up 20 points in some of the polls, and she loses by a very narrow margin last night, but still loses by about 3,000 votes. So, Charlie Sykes, what happened in Wisconsin last night?
Well, it turns out that we're not the crazy ones after all. Look, I'm looking at some of the local coverage here. You know, the words like, shocking, surreal, stunning, unheard of, comeback, Hail Mary play. And none of them are an exaggeration given what's happened here. But I think it's an indication that Democratic primary voters may be angry, but they're also focused on electability. And it's one thing to be angry, and want dramatic change. It's another thing to nominate somebody who might have turned the state over easily to a mega election denier. Again, this is one of those remarkable moments where, all of the spin and all of the hype about, the Democratic Socialists of America, I think that what you saw happen was, and I'm glad you played that clip about canceling Thanksgiving, that, some of these candidates, when the Klee lights go on, they're not necessarily ready for prime time. Now, economic populism may work, but when you're out there with the kind of woo-woo woke, faculty lounge, stuff like that, I think it read as kind of strange, out of the norm. And so David Crowley, who is a substantial individual, was able to capture that. And so, in the end, Wisconsin voters voted for the normie candidate. And by the way, now sets up the possibility of Wisconsin getting its first African-American governor.
Yeah, and woo-woo woke. I think, Claire, AOC has now coined the term woke one. Yeah. I don't know if we're in woke 2 or woke 3 or whatever we're in. But whatever we're in, this is a pretty remarkable, stunning, as Charlie said, if you look at the Wisconsin papers, it's an absolutely stunning outcome. And it's a stunning outcome in part because it really was an anybody but election where you have a candidate dropping out, then he's pulled back in. You're supposed to be on vacation. He didn't even speak last night. A statement was released, but not even by him. It was by his campaign manager. This shows you, again, just how they quickly pushed him back out there because they did not want this DSA candidate to win.
Yeah, it's interesting. Before I went to bed last night, I looked at the county by county results, and I had a sense that Crowley was going to win for one important reason. Rural Wisconsin. If you look at the margins in rural Wisconsin, that's really what put him over. And I think it's something Democrats forget a lot. We talk a lot about big blue places, cities, even suburbs, sometimes ex-urban areas. And I think we don't talk about rural America enough. The margins in rural America are incredibly important for electability. And Crowley showed last night that he could pull it out in rural Wisconsin, which bodes well for November. Now, having said that, I think it's also very important that everybody be focused on uniting. It is hard when you have a race like this and a result for everybody to get back together again. But Wisconsin now has an opportunity to elect the first black governor ever elected in the Midwest. So I think it's exciting, and hopefully all the people that were for Hong will get on board and realize what's at stake is way more important than maybe some differences around the edges. On the main policy issues, these two factions of the Democratic Party agree.
And we have seen those public messages of unity last night in Wisconsin and Michigan last week and in Minnesota as well. We'll dig into Minnesota a little bit, John, but it is a state-by-state, race-by-race thing. In Minnesota, the progressive candidate won to become the next senator of the state of Minnesota. Here, though, Crowley, again, just an extraordinary story, a guy who left the race, came back, and defeated the much let's say there was a lot of hype around Francesca Hong. He just put his head down and beat her.
Again, it's worth noting that he was supposed to be on vacation. I mean, maybe he still is. We didn't see him last night, but he won anyway. But you're right. This is what we've seen here in these. You mentioned the three Midwest states. This sort of the debate that's happening within the party right now, the progressives versus the more moderates. And there did seem to be, I will say, in the last handful of days, real panic among Democrats about this one in particular, about the Wisconsin race. They thought that she was just too far left, that she was good and was clumsy in some of the ways. And we joke about the Thanksgiving clip. That went really viral. People were upset about the Thanksgiving clip. If this election had been 1 week earlier, she wins probably pretty handily. It does speak. The governor really stepped up. The popular incumbent governor, Tony Evers, stepped up here. And helped, I think, get Crowley over the finish line. But certainly these debates will continue, Caddy, about where the Democratic Party wants to be. And to Claire's point, there also needs to be some healing right now. This was perhaps not quite as bruising as that Michigan Senate race, but still, there is no doubt this was pretty intense for a primary. But one thing helps. In both of these races, they now face a Republican, Mike Rogers in the Senate, and now Tiffany here in the governor's race, who can be very easily tied to Donald Trump, a member of the Freedom Caucus who's been with Trump every step of the way. And that would seem to be the best way to bring together a party that's divided, saying, hey, look, we have to take down this candidate supported by a very unpopular president.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan may be harder because the primary race was more vicious between the two Democratic candidates, and because Mike Rogers, although he has been very much in the Trump camp recently, he did start out, remember, as a little bit more Trump skeptical. I don't know if you can make some hay there, but we'll see. I think in Wisconsin it will be easier. This was a less vicious race between the Democratic Party candidates. It was chaotic, but it was less fewer personal attacks. I mean, Francesca Hong is saying, look, this was summer, my students were out, the numbers in Madison County, for example, weren't as high in terms of turnout as we would have wanted, but she seems prepared to put all that behind her to support the Democratic ticket now going forward. So, and Tiffany is a much more extreme version of MAGA, so maybe that will allow them to unite. But I think Michigan is going to be the key. Minnesota anyway, a more blue state, trending blue state. So it seems more likely that the Democrat will win there. Michigan is going to be the bigger challenge.
You know, we always remember, Charlie, of course, Tim Russert famously holding up the sign, writing on that whiteboard in 2000 that it's all about Florida, Florida, Florida. I remember back in 2020 talking about how what once was Florida was Wisconsin. Now I think it still is. Even the Democratic primaries come down to the very end. And I guess in 24, Wisconsin was the closest. There was the closest margin between Harris and Trump. I'm curious, what is the state of play in Wisconsin right now? We know the president has pretty historically low approval ratings across the nation. What about in Wisconsin? What is the political environment there as we go into the fall?
Well, I mean, first of all, people are still waking up to this stunning development here. But, as you point out, all the races in Wisconsin are competitive. Everything is decided by a razor's edge. And in a normal year, with Donald Trump's, poll numbers cratering, he would be in a lot of trouble. Democrats have been running the table. They've been winning a lot of elections. Democratic voters have been very, very engaged. And, to Jonathan Lemire's point, Democrats were panicking about Francesca Hong. There was real concern that they were going to put all of that in jeopardy. Well, now we have a complete reset. This race is going to be competitive, but there is no indication that the party is tremendously divided. Bernie Sanders and AOC did not endorse Francesca Hong, so you don't have that kind of a split. And Tom Tiffany is a MAGA election denier who is joined at the hip with Donald Trump. Every Republican that I spoke to in the last week was almost giddy about the prospect of running against Hong. I think the Tiffany campaign was geared up to run $50 or more million worth of ads attacking Francesca Hong for her extreme positions. And now all of that has to be put to the side, and we have a much more normal race, which would generally favor Democrats. But again, a reminder that every race in Wisconsin is competitive. It will be close.
Yeah.